Hey, I'm Jake, and today I'm talking about battling creative block. Okay, creative block. This is something that anybody who creates has probably had to deal with. I've dealt with it, and since my income is largely based on my performance as an artist, if I get creative block, it's not just frustrating, but it can be financially disastrous. So I've thought a lot about this over the years on how to mitigate creative block, how to keep it just from affecting me and affecting my work. And I want to share that with you today. Now, this is going to be something a little different from my normal videos. A few weeks ago, svslearn.com had me do a webinar for the community there on this exact subject, battling creative block. In the webinar, I was joined by two artists I highly respect, Lee White and Will Terry, and I led a discussion with the two of them where we unpacked this idea of creative block. We looked at it from every angle, and we tried to give the community tools on how to deal with it, how to battle it, and how to keep it from really affecting your work and affecting your your progression as an artist. Now, we had such a positive response from the community there, the svslearn.com community. Everybody said that this was one of the most powerful webinars or discussions that they had heard. It's impacted them and helped them to deal with creative block and just to become better as a creative person. Now, since this is a subject that you guys have asked me to talk about, and since it's something that I feel like the subscribers here could really benefit from, I asked SVS Learn if I could just post that webinar here on my channel. And now, normally the webinars, they're available just to subscribers to svslearn.com, but they gave me permission. They said, yeah, that's fine. You could put this webinar on your channel. We give you permission. Okay, so big thanks to them. This webinar is over an hour long, so I'm just going to push play on it, sit back, grab a pencil, grab a piece of paper, and try to get a drawing done while you're listening to it. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what we talked about in this webinar. I'd also like to hear other ways that you guys deal with creative block. What do you do to keep yourself performing at your best so you don't get bogged down with creative block? All right, thanks guys, and here's the webinar. Should we get down to it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I want to be able to take questions afterwards, give us enough time for that. But yeah, so it's battling creative block. That's what we're here to talk about. And the first thing I want to do is just answer the question, what is creative block? Before we get any further on the sources of it, or how do you manage it, or how do you deal with it, let's just be clear on what creative block is. And I want to hear what you guys think it is, and then I'll show you my answer. So Lee, what do you think creative block is?
I'm blocked on answering creative block. Creative block is just the inability to get started. That's the real problem. And to ask questions that walk you through the problem and get you going on something that you care about.
All right, I like that. Will, Terry?
Maybe I'll take a different approach. One of the problems that I've faced in the past is, I'm really sorry, we have a dog. Yeah. One of the problems that I faced in the past is that when I get an assignment, you work really hard to get the children's book or the comic book or the editorial assignment or whatever it is, and then once you get it, it's like, oh no, now what? What do I do? And that fear comes in of, what if I don't measure up? What if I can't impress the art director? Then my whole career, all this is for nothing. And you start that self-doubt, and all those ideas start hitting you, the negative ideas. And so to me, that's one area of creative block that I've had to deal with in the past.
I love it. That's great. So what is creative block? My answer, I love both of your take on it. I think my answer is a little bit more broader, and it includes what you guys are saying. So I call it any sort of short or long-term anxiety or apathy that keeps you from creating something. And so with that framework, this is how I want to approach today's webinar. Is what are the sources of creative block and what are the solutions to creative block? So let's get down into it and unpack this. I first want to talk about sources and going through each individual source and then coming up with solutions both from my experiences and your experiences. But what are the main sources of creative block? I feel like it could be broken down into two main sources. Internal, and those are reasons all caused by you. And external, and those are reasons caused by others or outside circumstances. And really, I think that's what it all boils down to. So Lee talked about just this inability to just start. And I think that's an internal creative block or an internal source for creative block. And Will talked about an assignment that he got from, so let's say you get an assignment and then you have this fear of not being able to perform. That's also another internal thing. And I'll get into specifics of all the many different internal reasons that we have creative block. And then I want to talk about some external reasons too, and then how I deal with them, how you guys deal with them, and let's go from there. Okay?
Cool. All
right, so let's go with internal first. Again, that's all these things that are caused by you. I should say, like, in creative block, it's a real issue. I've struggled with it. I don't know how often you guys struggle with it, but I've struggled with it. And when your livelihood depends on being creative and creating things, man, that could really like be damaging to your career if this is something that you're chronically struggling with. So this is something I thought about.
I'm going to play devil's advocate, Jake. I'm betting that a lot of people that are going to be watching this or are currently watching this are going to say, yeah, right, Jake Parker struggles with creative block. Because you post cool things just about every day, if not every day, on Instagram.
It's because I've learned how to deal with creative block.
A likely story.
No, really it is, and I'll tell you why. I just want to look through my notes, make sure I'm not missing anything before I move on. Okay, let's do the first one, and I think this is one of the most common creative blocks. I posted on a few social media sites that just said, how do so many people deal with creative block? And a lot of things that they were talking about was the mental block. All right, and that's kind of what Lee talked about. This is when you are out of ideas. You sit down at the drawing board, you sit down at the computer, you sit down at, you're going to write music or whatever it is that you're doing, photography or something. You just have no ideas, completely gone. Another thing, and this is the thing I feel like, is I feel like I've done everything. I'm sitting down and I have these ideas, but they just feel stale and tired, and like I've already done that to death. So is that something you guys deal with? Like you're just out of ideas?
Oh yeah.
Let me ask you, Lee, you kind of nodded your head. Is that really, like, you're always having ideas?
Well, I kind of have the opposite problem, but it's just as
oh, you got muted.
So it's a little bit different.
Say that again. You were muted for a second there.
Oh, I kind of have the opposite problem where I have too much stuff that I want to do, and sometimes that'll cause my inability to move forward. And I'm never sitting there with a blank one. I'm sitting there saying, I want to do some landscape paintings, and I want to write this story, and I want to do this other conceptual drawing, and and then I just get locked up and I go, eat a snack or something.
So there's either too many options or not enough options of what to do. What's your main with that, Will, in that area? What do you usually struggle with?
I mean, it's funny because when you make an image and you put it out there on social media, people respond differently to one than another, and you really get a gauge of what they like and what they don't like. And so for me, that's in my head. I don't want to do something that people are going to go, So I'll look at the things I've done in the past, and I go, I want to create something that's on the same level as that other thing that, but I think for me there's there's a part of me that understands that uh, you can't always. There's some luck involved in creating amazing things or really creative things, right?
Mhm.
So like you take a band like U2, one of the most popular rock bands
Mhm.
ever,
Yeah.
and they have B-sides, I mean they have, right? So I think you have to, at least for me, I come at it at the angle of I'm not going to always be able to create something that I
Mhm.
want to create, but I'm going to keep trying. And so
Mhm.
to me, it's the constantly throwing mud on the wall, because
Mhm.
some of it's going to stick and some of it's going to be better than the other stuff. And I think that's one of the things that you do is because you're constantly creating, um, you find ways to solve that problem of creative block. I mean, I
Mhm.
have strategies. I don't know if you want me to get into some of those
Well,
now
let me
or
see if
later.
your strategy matches this strategy. And this is the main thing in dealing with creative block, and that's having a full creative bank account. And I've talked about this a lot before. I've posted videos on this, but a creative bank account is something I feel actually really exists. And if you aren't actively making deposits in this creative bank account, then when you need to go to make a withdrawal to create something, you're not going to have any deposits in there to pull from. And so the main way to make these deposits, there's two ways. There's indirect experiences and direct experiences. And indirect experiences are any experiences that you that someone has created and you're experiencing it through their filter or through their medium. So this is film and television and music and comic books and novels and plays and dance theater and anything like that. This is something that someone has created based on their experiences, and they're sharing it with you, and you're getting it through their filter. Maybe it's a video game or something. Anything that you can do that you experience it, you absorb it, and you can pull ideas from that. And then the other side is direct experiences, and these are all things that you're doing yourself, directly experiencing. So that maybe you travel, you go to another country, or you go to another part of your state, or even you go to the other side of town. I know, like, a lot of times I stay on my side of town because that's where my grocery store is, and that's where the gym is, and sometimes I find myself on the other side of town, and I see things that I don't normally see in my neighborhood, and it sparks ideas. Okay, so experiences, meeting with people, putting yourself in situations so that you're around different kinds of people. Those are all ways to fill that creative bank account. What do you do, Will?
Well, one thing that I do is I keep lists, and I've done this for quite a long time, and I just know that when I sit down to have an idea, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the worst thing, I mean, I think everyone already knows this. The worst thing you can do is sit and stare at a blank piece of paper or a blank screen and just wait and hope and think, and grit your teeth, and that's not going to happen that way. You have to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two main things that I do is I collect reference and I make lists. And with those lists, for instance, for the ideas that I came up with for my little characters,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of times I could never come up with an idea for a specific character. But I would think about them while I was on my walk, and exercise is a big part of it too, because I think you have to be in a place where your mind can wander, and at home my mind usually can't wander because there's usually other things happening.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm out walking, I don't have anything to do, and so my mind is able to just wander naturally, and I'll think about a character and I'll start making associations with that character, and inevitably something will pop in, and it's not always the best idea, but I'll whip my phone out, jump into the list, pop it in there, and it might be a month or two before I ever start to work on that idea. But when I was working on that project, I had to have a new character every week, or even two characters every week.
Yeah.
And the thing that people didn't understand is that I was working on those ideas for many months before they were actually seeing them hit social media.
Yeah. I
Um,
remember.
and I was getting them from other people. So, use other people for as your muses, right? I mean, like, I would subtly work it into a conversation sometimes if I was struggling for an idea for a character that I really, really wanted to do and knew that I had to do, but I couldn't come up with an idea. I would just start using my friends when we were out. Like, what would you do for this? And it's amazing what happens when you start talking about something with someone else, the associations they bring in. So
that's great. Okay, I want to move to the next one, unless you wanted to mention something, Lee.
I do. I just wanted to mention the fact that it's kind of interesting to me when I see pros talking about stuff and things start to overlap. And I'm listening to you guys talk, and you both said you basically remove yourself from your familiar surroundings and you set yourself up for success. And I think that's a big takeaway for fighting the mental block, is just taking time and saying, okay, I know I'm going to want to sketch something or make something later. What might that thing be? Instead of waiting and saying, oh, I need to, this happens a lot with the sketchbook where people are like, oh, I need to sketch more. And then they sit down and they don't know what to sketch. And I always tell people there's the first part of wanting to sketch more is figuring out what's going to go in the sketchbook, and take like a week to fill that thing up with, like, it's going to be, lists of things and printouts of reference, and just like Will was saying, ideas that you want to explore. And that's like my first step to drawing, is just getting all that prep work going and filling that bank, like you were saying. And I love the idea of a concrete bank account. And the next thing is just kind of giving myself the freedom to make ugly things, and knowing that the whole process is messy and ugly, and not trying to make something really clean. And that's kind of how I move forward with it.
That's great.
Can I add one thing in there real quick?
Yeah.
We're gonna hijack your presentation. Just one other thing that I try to do is, I think my worst enemy for creativity, or one of my worst enemies for creativity, is my left brain. My left brain is constantly telling me to stay conventional. People will think this is stupid. That doesn't work. That couldn't possibly be. And I get stuck in reality. And this is always a problem, and I think it always will be. And the fight for me is allowing the right brain to ask questions like, why couldn't it be this way? Why couldn't that happen? Why couldn't this be this size or that be that size? And so the image that I just came up with for Lee's treehouse assignment was, everyone, I thought, well, and I'm always trying to do something different than what I think most people will do. I think that's something that you should strive for with your creativity, is obviously to try to not do what is predictable. So, I saw this picture of strawberries and I thought, oh, the colors are really neat. And the idea, the right brain is just saying, how could that be incorporated? And at first it was, well, maybe it's, maybe there's strawberries at a low angle level, and then you look up at the tree, and then I was like, well, what if the tree is just in the strawberries? What if the tree is the strawberries, and then the strawberries are huge?
Yeah.
And so it's asking, it's giving yourself permission sometimes to ask those kinds of crazy questions. The crazier, the better. You can always throw them away.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. And that actually leads right into my next. This is a good segue, Will. The next sort of block that you deal with maybe it's not so much the idea thing, but I call it an emotional block. And this is where you're just struggling with fear. And it's usually either a fear of failure, or where you think, and this is something that Will mention first off, was I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be able to deliver, what if my ideas suck, what if all these sort of fears that come in and pile on you. The other flip side of that is fear of success. Well, what if I do this and it's enormously successful, and then I'm like stuck with this thing, and I just wanted to try it out, but this is for the truly imaginative people. I don't know if I deal with that much, but sometimes that can be a thing. Maybe it's a fear of commitment. If I take on this thing, then I'm committed to it for a year, and I don't want to do it for a year. So that keeps you from starting. And I think emotional blocks are, the mental block is more of in the here and the now. I think emotional blocks affect bigger projects or long-term projects. It's when you're sitting down and you've always wanted to do that children's book, but you don't ever sit down and do that children's book. You never sit down and write that novel or that graphic novel. And a lot of times it's you have the ideas, but it's that emotional block that's keeping you from there. Another kind of fear is that maybe you don't want to. Maybe going into this you're going to have to bare your soul, and you don't want to bare your soul. You don't want people to see your innermost feelings and thoughts. Or you might, we talked about, you might not think you're good enough, or it could just be as simple as you're just not motivated. You just lack motivation to do it. So those are all the different kinds of emotional blocks that people deal with. Will, you've spoken a little bit about that today already. Lee, do you have experience with any of these?
The emotional block is a tough one, and I do have experience with that, and then some recommendations too. I see the emotional block a lot with students who sketch a lot, and sketching is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but some students stay in perpetual sketch mode, and by staying in sketch mode, they never do the actual fully finished piece where people can say, "Oh, that's the best I got." They can always go back and say, "Oh, you don't like that? Well, it's just a sketch. Don't worry about it." You know what I mean? They never put the finish up. And I used to, when I was at Art Center, I started art much later than a lot of people, and I was petrified while I was in school. And we had this moment at the end of every term where we had a scholarship competition, and they gave you wall space, and you had to put up your work from that term, and a group of judges came by. And I made sure that every term I went ahead and got my space, and I put the stuff up, and I was terrified to do it. But there was a certain kind of I felt like I graduated past the work. Each time that happened, I stepped up and I said, "This is as good as I got right now." And I put everything into it. Even though I was really scared, at least it was that moment. And that's what I'd love to recommend people to do, is like do a gallery show or do something where you have to put the finished work up there, submit to a competition. Even the treehouse competition that we're doing kind of invites that. Like, what do you got right now? And just saying, okay, I'm going to do the best I got and move past it. And so
I like that.
It's tough.
Put yourself in a position to deliver, right?
You have to, yeah.
That's great. I think, and Will spoke to this too, in our transition. But talk it through to yourself. Why do I have this fear? And sometimes, like saying, and then what? If I draw this, then this will happen, and then what? Well, this will happen, and then what? Well, that'll happen. And you might realize that the end result isn't that bad. Or if it is bad, you realize, well, I can deal with that. I think talking it through, envisioning outcomes, and either coming to terms with those outcomes or coming to peace with those outcomes. And I want to say too, I guess the caveat here for this whole thing is, us three, we're not therapists, right? We don't have professional credentials for this, but we do have combined 65 years of experience in creating things professionally, and there's things that we've learned, and I think all of these things that we've learned over the years really do apply. The talking it through, envisioning outcomes, putting yourself in a position to succeed or to put something finished, whether you succeed or not. But I think for anybody out there listening to this, watching this, if you do have serious emotional problems with your work, you might want to see a therapist, an actual bona fide therapist. So, if you've done these things and you've worked through and you still have the block, it might be worth it to just call a professional and say, hey, can you help me work through something? And I know creatives who do that, and it's extremely successful and helpful. So I just wanted to add that. All right, should we move to the next one?
Before you move on, can I add one more thing? I think that a lot of people that I've met over the years, one thing that I think I identified in them, and I've identified it in myself as well, is that basically sometimes we see ourselves as not failing if we don't follow through. Because if we don't follow through, then people can't not like what we're doing, and we haven't failed. And that's a cyclical thing that happens in your mind where you keep procrastinating, you keep putting off, because if I don't do, I don't have to find out the result. When really if you could somehow, and I don't know, this may be where the therapist comes in, but if you can somehow say, no, by doing it and failing, like I probably am going to fail, because most first-time things, or second or even third, or most attempts at greatness fail. So by jumping in and getting on with that failure, that is actually the process to success. So I need to just, and I don't know how you just break through and just do it and just decide one day, because
I think there's a huge benefit to the kind of just having us talk about this right now, because at least for me, when I enter competitions, whether it's sports or art or whatever, I know if I know that everybody else is nervous too, then I'm just like, well, I'm just part of it just comes with it. But the worst part is when you're by yourself in your studio and you think that everybody else is just bombing these drawings and they're so confident, and that nobody struggles with it. And we all do. So I think there's some kind of, maybe that can be the push that somebody takes away from this as well. If Will has it and Jake has it and Lee has it, then, and I got it, you just got to put it out there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, now these next few I think are a little bit more unconventional, but I still think that they need to be discussed, because you can't be your most creative self, you can't be your best creative self if you are under duress or stress or things like that. And so these emotional and mental blocks are, I think, the more typical things that keep us from creating. But the things here, I want to dig in a little deeper. And I think holistically, if you look at every aspect of your life, you're a creative person, you're pulling from every aspect of your life to create. And if these things aren't I think if a lot of these things aren't in line, you're not going to be making your best work. So for lack of a better term, this next one is what I call the soul block. Okay? And things that fall under this are, sometimes you might have an addiction that's either out of control or it's too demanding on your life. And I know of creative people who love video games. I know me personally, I love social media. And then you've got the traditional trappings of, alcohol, maybe overeating, maybe, sex, maybe, there's any sort of, drugs, any of those kinds of addictions as well, which are obviously going to hamper and dampen your creativity. So what I think you need to do is look at your life, give yourself a self-audit and say, okay, do I have a problem with some of these things that I end up spending a lot of time, money, emotional attention, mental attention on, and what are they really giving my life? So what I did a while ago was, a couple of years ago, was I self-audited and I realized I was spending a lot of time surfing the web, and every time I'd get to a point where I'm just a little bit bored or I'm not engaged in my work, boom, I'm on a website clicking around, looking at stuff, and I realized, I started recording the amount of time I was spending doing that, and I was thinking, well, I'm an artist, I need to fill my mind with stuff, I need to fill this creative bank account. But I was like, well, what did I really gain from this hour-long session of Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, all these different things? What did I really get from that? Nothing, or this one little nugget. And so that's when I realized, okay, I need to put some things into my life to make it so I'm not so addicted to this, and that I can spend my time more wisely on other things. So do a personal audit of that, and figure out what is it that could be fine-tuned or could be fixed. Or if it's a major thing, then of course seeking therapy or having some sort of intervention or something to get you on the right track so that you can be your best self. So that's one part of it, addiction. Another part is, I know we have a lot of people on here and on SVS that are religious, sometimes, or spiritual. Sometimes if you're out of step with God or with your spiritual center, whatever your spiritual center is, that can dampen your creativity as well. And so what I recommend doing is get right with whatever it is that guides you spiritually. If you need to repent of stuff, repent of it. If you need to go out and apologize to somebody and clean up your act some way, do that. If you need to spend more time just finding your center and meditating, do that to fix that. And then the third thing, so um, the first part is I guess yourself. The second part is something bigger than you, and then the third part is, are you out of step? A soul block is, are you out of step with loved ones or people in your life? And I know a lot of times if you're in a fight with somebody, whether it's a spouse, a friend, or a neighbor, that can dampen. You can sit down to create and just be like, I've got all this angst inside of me. I can't create if I'm dealing with this stuff. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Maybe you've had a loss of a loved one, whether it's an actual physical death or they've just left your life somehow. Or you have a child or a sibling or a friend or someone who's really gone off the rails and they're damaging themselves and it's affecting your life. Or maybe, I remember a few years ago, my parents got divorced. I was an adult. I already had kids. My siblings were adults, and then my parents decided to get a divorce. And that consumed the family's attention for like a year straight. And that's all we could talk about and all we could think about. And finally, my wife and I were like, hey, this is every one of our conversations about your parents' damn divorce. We need to talk about other stuff. And so I realized that at some point we actually had to divorce the family to a degree so that we could move on with our lives. And then lastly, in this soul block thing too, look at yourself, audit your life. In any area, are you being dishonest or deceitful? Do you have hatred towards a person or a group? Do you feel like you're a victim? Or do you have anger? Are you being selfish about things? All of those things are out of line and out of step, and you've got to come to some sort of peaceful accord with all of this. Right wrongs, reconnect with loved ones, find your peace with certain people, come to terms with certain people. And I think clean up your act if you have an addiction of any kind, small or big, and find your spiritual center. Any comment from you guys on these?
I have one that I definitely want to make. It's a great a great point you're making with this one. And just kind of getting your whole life set up in a correct direction, in the correct way. I wanted to highlight one of the ones you're talking about in the beginning with addiction and what I like to call fake work. I talk about that in business class. A lot of students do this in the college level. They will, if you're out drinking, you're not working. If you're on Facebook, you kind of know you're not working. But there's another side of that where you're on a forum that's about illustration, or you're looking at images on Pinterest or something that are illustrations. There's a certain amount that is research and you're moving your projects forward, and then there's another side of it where you're kind of just distracted and it's just, even watching SVS videos can be this, where if you're not actively learning, you could be just basically doing what I call fake work. It's in the illustration realm, but you're not actually moving forward. And so just got to highlight that and watch out for it, because it's one where at the end of the day you can say, well, I watched a bunch of illustration videos. I guess I didn't check off the box that I was productive, and you're really not.
Right. And that's such a good point. There would be times where I would, be on Pinterest or be on DeviantArt, and I'm saving images and I'm organizing my save files. Oh, this is good reference. This is good reference. Reference for what, Jake? What exactly are you going to save that picture for, unless it's something you're actually working on right now, or you'll be working on? And a lot of times I'd spend all this time saving stuff that, this will be great I'm sure I'll need this in the future. I don't want to lose it. And I think a little bit of that's fine, but spending hours and hours doing that makes you feel like you're working. And also, I think it tricks you into think that you're being creative, because you're looking at all this artwork and you're looking at other people's creation things. You actually aren't in the act of creating something, and I don't think that fulfills you, and it definitely doesn't make you a better creator. I feel like get in, get what you need, and get out, and then come back to it when you need something else, or set aside a specific amount of time. Well, here's my half hour of messing around, reference searching, and leave it at that half hour or 15 minutes or whatever, just so it doesn't get out of control.
Yeah.
Will, did you want to do something? Say something about that?
Yeah, the part about fighting with other people, Um, you know, and with like my wife, if we're in a fight, if we're arguing about something, I have to hang my head low. If I need to create, go in
Yeah.
there and like, okay, we got to talk this through because I need to work. I mean, it's so true. I can't work if I'm upset with somebody close. So I think that's a really good point that
Mhm.
you're bringing in. And I didn't even think about that when you were going to talk about this topic, but that's a really good part of it.
Yeah, I find that, yeah, if there's ever something wrong with me and my wife or somebody I'm really close with, man, sitting down and trying to tap into something deep to create, and there's like that nastiness that's in there, you gotta pull it out before you can.
Well, because you're going to try to be happy and come up with something really fun and creative. Those things are fighting against each other.
Yes. All right, let's move to the next one. Next one is the health block. And this, we've talked about, our minds, we've talked about our souls, emotionally. I think the health block's another one too. If you aren't eating right or getting enough rest or exercising right, that can, you, you know, there was about 5 or 6 years where I didn't do any serious exercise, or even more, maybe 10 years. In my 20s was like, I'm still young, I can do whatever I want. What I didn't realize in my 30s, when I started getting into exercising and eating a little bit better and those types of things, how much more creative I felt
Mm.
because I was engaging my body and and really letting my body like I guess wear itself out so that my brain could actively
Mm.
work on stuff. And so anytime I'm exercising and really good, like a good run or something where you get sweaty and just beat, that I don't know if it releases chemicals or something, but I always come out of that feeling a lot more creative. And of course, I feel crappy when I don't eat good, and I don't feel like creating as well when I feel crappy. And if I'm only getting 4 hours of sleep every night consistently, man, it's so hard to like even stay awake at the desk. So look at, if you're sitting down, you're not being able to create, do again, another self audit. Well, how am I doing? Am I overeating? Am I not eating enough? Am I eating the wrong things? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I exercising? Those three things, man, they can make the difference between creating your best work and just creating mediocre work.
There was a joke that I heard one time, and I can't remember who said it or what the joke was, but I can give you the gist.
Hmm.
And it was a student came to this master and said, "Master, how do I become like you? How do I do? I just want a life like you have. I want to be able to make the things you make." And he basically went through this list, and it included things like exercise, all these different things. And at the end, the student said, "Yeah, I know about all those things, but I want to. I just tell me the secret to doing what you do." you know. And it sounds so obvious. I mean, it when you say exercise it to a bunch of artists, I can imagine a lot of people rolling their eyes.
Hmm.
Especially like maybe younger people who aren't into exercise. Um, but the benefits are like if you're converted to it, you know how it's helping you,
Hmm.
and you're a master, and you're saying, okay, you got to do this. So
Hmm.
it is really. I mean, I can attest too that it really is something that unlocks something, and it's hard to put a finger on. But I
Hmm.
can't. There was one time where I was doing the children's book, The Three Little Gators, and based on the time frame and everything, I had to get it done. I ended up with 28 days to paint,
Hmm.
and that was when I was painting in acrylics. 28 days to finish the book, and the book really suffered in a lot of ways because I was just doing nothing from morning till night, nothing at all except painting to make this deadline, and it was the worst time. I mean, I'm like in the best career of my life. I'm doing exactly what I want
Yeah.
in a hellish environment of trying to, and being worried and having anxiety the whole time. And, and I set myself up for that.
Hmm.
But a life in balance is so much more. enjoyable and creative, and the outcome is so much better.
Yeah.
And fight the weird. There's a weird tendency among illustrators. I don't know why. It's kind of a badge of honor to do the all-nighter. I noticed a lot of people talking about, oh, I stayed up all night doing this one. The first thing I think of is, well, you didn't plan something correctly.
Right.
I mean, every night there is a reason to be up all night. If literally, as a pro, sometimes you get the assignment and it's like really is due the next day. Of course you're going to do the all-nighter, but it should not be a normal thing. And when I was getting my grad degree, I went to sleep at normal hour every night. Meanwhile, everybody else is, I'm doing all-nighters, and then all of a sudden, after like 2 or 3 days, now they're moving slow, and they have to do all-nighters because they're moving slow.
Mm-hmm.
And they're selfish in the critique because they're asleep in the critique, and so they're worthless to their peers.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm the old fuddy-duddy teacher, right?
All right. This is the last one on my internal causes, internal sources, and this is the work habit block. All right. And sometimes your own work habits get in the way of you being creative. So I break these down into two, and it goes right along with what Lee was saying. It's amazing how all these sort of like bleed into each other. But you either have poor time management skills or poor project management skills. So you might feel like you don't have enough time to work on your stuff, or maybe the time that you work is too late at night, or maybe it's too early in the morning, or you're spending too long working on stuff, or I guess that's the flip side of not having enough time. So that's the time side. And then also project management. You don't know how to juggle projects. So maybe you overcommit to stuff. Maybe you forget that something's due while you're working on something else, and then you have to scramble and finish that other thing. And the other flip side, we're not creative all the time. We have other administrative stuff to do. So it's like reading contracts, printing out, signing contracts, or sifting through emails, managing your social media, whatever it is. All of these things I call it administrative stuff. They all take time. And so what you need to do, and all this stuff can eat into your creativity, and when you sit down to create, if you're stressed about a certain job you got to do and this and that, it's going to be hard it's a block. And so the thing you got to do is you got to figure out, and I just did a YouTube video on this, how to manage your time management for artists. Let's go check that out. Maybe we'll do a more in-depth lesson here on SVS. But figure out how to manage your time, figure out a routine. I'd say get a solid routine that you're in the office or in your studio at a certain time, or you're at your art desk at a certain time, that you have systems set up to deal with all this other stuff. So one of my systems is do emails in chunks. Don't just answer emails every time a new one comes in, but save email time for one time of the day or 2 times of the day so that I'm not distracted. And then I think also you want to design your schedule so you leave room for spontaneity, and you leave room for you being able to stare at the wall for a little while until you come up with an idea, or to go for a walk, or to exercise, or do whatever it is that you need to be creative. You guys have experience in this or solutions for this?
One of the things I noticed that I always ran into was always feeling like I was behind, kind of like Will was saying. So every job felt rushed, and then it brought in the anxiety and all that stuff. And I realized once I stood back and looked at the whole thing that my whole schedule that I made for myself in terms of work scheduling and job scheduling is I set up an ideal situation on my calendar. Like, this job's going to take 3 days, and the next job's going to take 3 days, and then 4 days. And what would happen is the first job takes 5 days. Well, now everything past that has now tumbled. Mm-hmm. And so now I just learned to give myself bigger buffers in between the jobs and just say no to some stuff, because if without those buffers, you're going to get hammered at some point.
Mm-hmm. And that goes to something I talked about in the time management thing is for 2 or 3 weeks, when you know you've got a bunch of work to do, give yourself a time audit. Record exactly how long everything takes. And then you have actual information on your side, so you know when you get another assignment like that, or you do another project like this. And it doesn't have to be just with art, but everything in your life. Record how long it takes for you to get ready in the morning, how long it takes for you to commute to work, how long your lunch break actually is, And when you look at all that, then when you go to make a schedule, you know, okay, I have to design a page for this children's book. I know a page design is going to take 4 hours or 8 hours. And so when you're filling out your schedule, you're like, okay, well, I have 2 hours a night. That means it's going to take, a whole week to do this, right? So yeah, that's how you figure out a good schedule and a way to work. Will, do you have anything to go with that?
Every time you say yes to one thing, you say no to another, and no is a complete sentence. You don't ever need to explain why. I'm gonna take credit for what Tammy Perron's put in the chat. No, that sums it up for me, because I was already thinking, saying no has been liberating. I used to say yes to too many things, and that could be saying no to, could be some things that are family expectations, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not a good father unless I attend every single soccer game that that all of my kids are in, or every single. I don't know. I mean, I ask myself questions. Did any kids turn out where their dad didn't show up to all their games? Yes. Did any kids end up in jail whose fathers turned up to all their games? Probably. So we make these truth statements like, we put this load on ourselves. I'm not good unless I'm doing this, 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 and this. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's move on. What's that?
There's one good question that I know we're saving questions to the end, but there's one question that pertains to this right now, and that is, what about setting a schedule? And then you have anxiety, like, okay, I got from 4 to 6 to do my children's book sketch page, and then 4 comes, and you're like, oh, I have to be creative right now, and then you panic because you got the block. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I've done that too, where I'm like, I've scheduled out an hour to do, I try to do a drawing every day that I either post online or something, so I'll schedule an hour, and I sit down out of ideas, out of juice or whatever, and it comes back to all of these other things that we're talking about. What is it that when you now have time to create that you can't create? Look and see, are you out of ideas? Are you emotionally, like, fear of failing? You have that emotional fear. Are you just dog tired because you pulled an all-nighter? Or are you, is there something going wrong in your personal life that you need to clean up that's keeping you from it? So it comes back to all those other things. Typically, when you sit down and you've got 2 free hours to work on a thing, like, you should be able to just get down and nail it. And if you're not, it's because something else in here is out of line, misaligned. All right, let's go to the external. There's less of these. It's anything caused by others or outside situations, not in your control. Okay, so the first kind of block that you run into is, I call situational blocks, and these are situations you find yourself in. Your car broke down. You're moving. You're in the middle of a move. You got to pack up your house. You got to, you might be moving to the south for a couple months during the summer. It could be that you just had a baby, or you're in you have kids that you have to take care of. It could be that you have a day job that's just demanding, like it requires so much out of you. Or it could be something as simple as your work area is just a mess. Like, you can't even find where your pens are. Okay, these are all situational blocks that you can find yourself in. And really, there's only, I want to say one thing before how you deal with it. I've found that anytime you move to a new city, you have a baby, or you lose a loved one, or deal with any sort of major sickness, and that should be another situation, you just get sick. I find it takes about a year to get a new equilibrium going. And don't beat yourself up when you're 3 months after one of these big life events and you're still not in a groove again. Just know it takes a year for you and everybody in your life around you to kind of find that equilibrium again, and maybe it's a little bit longer, maybe it's a little shorter, but it's going to take some time. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But with any of these, I don't think you can create under these certain kinds of stresses. So number one, don't stress if you're in the middle of a move and you just don't feel creative because there's chaos around you. Number two, take care of your problems and create afterwards. So just deal with those problems first and then sit down and create. Or you have to figure out certain coping methods that you can latch onto until this thing passes over. Okay, so I don't know. Is that something you guys have dealt with or have solutions for outside of what I've said?
I've been remodeling a house, 3 houses for 12 years, and I hate it. And yet I keep putting myself in the situation. But it's you're speaking the truth right now. It's been a huge distraction, and without all this other stuff lined up that you've been talking about, I would not have gotten anything done. I'm amazed that I get it. I'm still remodeling. I just coming in here and turning on my computer. I just came from painting my kitchen. Like, that's how my life works, and it sucks. I want to swear, but you got to realize when you perpetually do it, like, you got to pull yourself out of it, just like all this other stuff that we're talking about. And I realize this is kind of a pattern that I do, and I've just got to get done with it and move out and move on. Otherwise, it's just taken so much effort and time away from it. So it's true. It comes up.
Yep.
I'm going to weigh in on that and just say, if you're an artist, which I'm assuming everyone that's watching this is, you're an artist for life. And so if you're experiencing, like Sarah said, that, I know she just had a baby, and I didn't know they moved, but they also moved. But I mean, sometimes people really get frustrated because of their situational block at the moment. But if you can take a step back and look at your entire life and say, I'm going to create so much amazing artwork in my life. It might not be right now. It might be later. Now, in saying that, I haven't had to experience this. Mm-hmm. I've been blessed. I've been able to work on art, since college. I haven't had to put it off to the side, but I have made lane changes, and I've had to sit there and wonder, will I be able to make this lane change? I'm going to just keep plugging forward and hoping that it will happen. Specifically, the lane change from editorial to children's books. But yeah, I don't plan on ever retiring. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you guys, but I make art. That's what I love to do. I don't want to do it 24/7, but every week I make art, and I can't see a time where I'll ever not want to make art. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing is, you don't ever have to retire from this, and you don't ever have to do it professionally either. I mean, there are a lot of people that join us who know they're artists and they're just happy making art. But we sometimes, I think we put these constraints and these expectations on ourselves that give us more anxiety. Like, I have to, and I'll hear students sometimes, and they'll say, I'm giving myself a year to become successful as an artist, and if after a year I can't do it, then I'm going to go do something else. And my answer is, that's cool. Give yourself that time, but if you're an artist, you're an artist, whether you like it or not. Like you're going to be an artist whether you're working in a bank somewhere. So, give yourself that time to see if you can, because obviously they want to earn a living from it, and I understand that. Yeah. But if you can't earn a living within a year, go do something else to earn the money that you have to have. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to stop making art. You don't have to stop that progression.
One last thing I want to say about situation blocks too. Say you have a new baby, or you just moved, or you lost a loved one, or you went through a huge sickness, or you have a super demanding job. All of those situations is life experience, and that is like direct experiences that go into your creative bank account. And so maybe during this year where you're coping and trying to find that equilibrium, you're just absorbing everything that's going on in your life, and then that feeds into this time period where now you can create, and now you can draw on your experience of having a baby, or of losing that lost one, or of having to spend 2 weeks in the hospital, and have that inform your work. and maybe that's a character, or maybe that's a children's book story, or maybe it's, you know, some album you want to create, you know, or something, you know, lyrics to a song or something, whatever, any form of creativity. The situations you find yourselves in is just fodder for you being able to create stuff. Okay, next one is what I call the poverty block. Okay, now poverty typically means like super, super poor, right? And that could be an actual block, but I'm thinking more of a global use for this word. So first off, yeah, you just might not have enough money, and that might be a huge stress, and you've got to work 2 or 3 jobs to create. And this goes into the situation thing where you need to deal with that first. But there's other sort of things that you can experience poverty in, and that may be that you don't have the right tools. You may not have a good artist network or creativity network of other artists to work with, and so you're just kind of this lone person in the wilderness trying to be creative. That was me. I felt like that was me a lot of times growing up where I grew up. I didn't know any professional artists, and I wanted to be a professional artist. And so I just had to really lean on my inner support group of other friends who were creative, and parents who, you know, and teachers and people who were like, yeah, good job, Jake, pat you on the back. But I did have this lack of a professional network. You might be in a place where you don't have internet, you know. You might not have a space to work in. For a couple of years, I didn't have, every night after the kids went to bed, I would clear off the kitchen table, set up all my art stuff, work for a few hours, then clean up all my art stuff and go pack it away so the kids couldn't like ruin it. And that's how I worked every night after work, after my job. And so you might be experiencing poverty in any of these little, you know, a lack of these things. And what I think the solution is here, and another one is maybe you just lack knowledge. You don't know what you're supposed to know. You don't know how to do a children's book. You don't know how to draw comics or whatever it is. I think it goes along with the situation thing. You either take care of it, you figure out a way to get the right tools, or to build a network, or find a space that works for you, or you cope with it. And honestly, I think this might be the better thing. Sometimes working within these constraints can yield better creative results than when you have all your needs met. And I know that I've come up with some amazingly creative stuff when I was working under these kinds of constraints. Sometimes I look back and think, man, I was way more creative the more constraints that I had. What about you guys? What do you think?
I would like to add to this, in terms of tools and all that. It's a great point, because one of the things I talk about in a lot of my classes is avoid having a magic pencil. And what I mean by that is you set yourself up for such a complicated work scenario that in order for you to sketch in your book, you got to have this pen you ordered from Japan, and this certain kind of paper, and the special setup, you know, and all that stuff. And then it's prohibiting you from actually making work. And so I always advise people to go really simple with tools. And one of my guidelines is you should be able to get your materials. If you travel to a third world country, you should still be able to work. So can you work on just typing paper and a number 2 pencil? Don't need the magic pencil, and make that be a requirement for you to do work.
Right.
Yeah.
I just a couple quick thoughts. I had talking to a neighbor just today actually, and his daughter is an artist and is thinking about doing more with this. But he was saying, well, but I don't have enough money to buy her a tablet like you use, because he's seen what I've drawn on. And I'm trying to tell him, like, paper and pencil always has been valid, always will be. Probably better for her to be working on paper and pencil right now than digital. And he was the block, because he was like, well, but then she's not up to speed, you know. And I was trying to help him understand, like, no, it's okay, like, have her just get pencil mileage on paper. The second thing is, money can be a problem depending on what you're trying to do. So an example, my sister wants to do photo editing, and she wanted to save money, and so she got a really cheap tablet, the bamboo thing, piece
Yeah.
of junk. And then she got Photoshop Elements or something, and she was trying to compete with what was being done professionally in photo editing,
Mm.
photo retouching and stuff. And she wanted me to solve her problems, and I'm trying to explain to her, you can't do what they're doing because you don't have the right tools. So having the right tools for the job is important, and that can definitely be a problem. Now for her, luckily she could afford to upgrade, but maybe
Well,
I don't know what the answer is to that
well,
exact.
to that is, yes, you can't do what other people are doing with those tools, but what can she do with a bamboo tablet and Photoshop Elements
Right, she's asking the wrong questions.
that's still creative?
Right.
And I think it goes back to your pencil thing too. Like, I remember there was one time I couldn't work in my studio, but I had this idea that I wanted to draw, and so all I had was a scrap piece of paper and a red ballpoint pen, and I ended up sketching it out and making a really nice drawing with those two things. I don't normally use them, but I fell back on them, and I was creative with those tools that I had. That was just something that recently happened. So, I think the thing is you change your outlook and say, okay, this is what I have, this is what's been dealt to me, how creative can I be in this? And you might surprise yourself.
Yeah.
All right, let's do the last one here. It's the communication block. And this, a lot of times, it's more specifically has to do with when you're working in a team or with others. And I've had this. I'll get an assignment, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, well, geez, I actually don't really know what the client needs. I'm not too clear on what the project's parameters are. Or even I'm not even clear where my responsibility on this project starts and where it ends. And that can really inhibit your creativity. And it all comes down to not having full communication with the people that you're working with. So the simple solution to this is, instead of, and I've done this before, I've been an idiot before, where I'm just like, I'll waste a day, like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. I guess I'll do this. When a simple phone call, email, or just setting up a quick meeting saying, listen, is this what I do or is this what I do? And can I take it this far, or do I need to dial it back? And what exactly is my responsibility? And then hearing from them directly, X, Y, Z. Then, when I've done those things, I can go back, sit down, and boom, I can come up with ideas and I can create, because I know what those things are.
Great.
You guys have any experience with that as well? Or any comment on that?
I think you summed it up.
Okay. So just to sum everything up here, basically what you want to do is self-audit yourself regularly. Maybe it's the beginning of each day, or it's the beginning of each week. I usually do each week. I'll sit down, figure out where am I at, what am I doing to fill my creative bank account, what am I doing to deal with my fears, my personal fears, what am I doing in my relationship with others, in my relationship with God or spiritually. I'm looking at all these different things weekly. How is my system working, my system of scheduling my time, scheduling my projects? Is everything good? Am I lined up with, do I have enough time to do everything? I'm making sure that I'm exercising and I'm working. I'm going through all these things. And if there's anything out of miss, I'm trying to put those back together and put them in place. And Will started this out and said, okay, Jake, you always are creative. You always post things. You never have to deal with this. And he made a good point. I still deal with it, but I've noticed lately it's less and less of a problem because I'm hitting these things head on before it becomes like a problem that I really have to deal with. And when I sit down, I realize, oh, I have a big block here. I can't create. That's when I realize I've gotten really lazy on the self-auditing and figuring out how to solve these problems before they happen. So that's my advice to you. I feel like I really want to unpack this. I didn't, creative block, oftentimes we just say, oh, you can't think of an idea? Well, go do something to fill ideas. But I think it's a much bigger, more holistic thing than that. And yeah, thanks you guys for your help in sort of unpacking this with me. And I'm happy to take a few questions here. We don't want to go too long, but I'll take a few good questions, and maybe us three can answer them.
I got a question that popped up on the little board there. Copied a couple of them down. What if you have too many ideas and at the same time want to choose the most original one that's different from other people? So basically what they're getting at is, okay, I made my list and I got all this reference and I'm making all, all the stuff. And then how do you prioritize that? And that's kind of the question where that's going. And I think the big thing for you guys is asking what is the most important thing to you? What do you care the most about? And let that be the first priority, and let other things. Like for me, like I said, I like landscape painting and all this other stuff. That's not going to be a #1 priority for me. If I'm starting to sketch and I just don't know what to do, I want to do a children's book. So that's my main thing. And so whatever's going to feed that first, and come up with your list of like what are the things you want to accomplish first, and then let all the subject matter follow that. Do you guys have any techniques?
I think you nailed it dead on. You've got to answer the question of what if if it's a particular piece that you're sitting down to do, what do I want to accomplish with this piece? And if you don't know the answer to that question, then yeah, you're going to be confused. You're not going to know what to draw. You're not going to know what to do. Your ideas are, for. And for me, I'll sit down and I'll be like, okay, I've got 2 hours to work on a piece. What's it for? I know exactly what it's for and what I'm going to use it for. And then it's just a matter of being creative and you coming up with the right idea that fits that need for that thing. And if it's like, well, I don't have any agenda and I just want to create a portfolio piece, then I think it's time you sat down and thought bigger, like, what's this portfolio for? What job am I going to try and get with this portfolio? And then okay, well, I want to get a job at an animation studio and I want to work as a visual development artist, so I need to make a piece that fits, what that portfolio needs. That might help you. So yeah, look at what your goals are, what you need to accomplish, and act accordingly.
There's another question here that I thought was really good that I wanted to speak to, and that was from Jocelyn Smith. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of long, but it basically talks about that we throw out our quote-unquote bad ideas before we actually have a chance to explore them. And I find that happens to me, and I find it happens to a lot of students, where I'll have a student that's like, I'm creatively blocked up, I can't come up with anything. And then I'll look at the stuff that they were working on in their thumbnails, and I'm like, well, what's wrong with this idea? Oh, it wasn't working out. Well, they're all going to go into an ugly stage, like Lee mentioned earlier. And they're not, a lot of times, that's when you're in that self-doubt of, this thing looks ugly. I don't want to work on this. It's not working. Well, every good idea went through an ugly stage, and so someone looking at it could go, well, that's worthless right now, But so one thing that I encourage students often to do is to say, you've got to do this assignment. And you came up with this idea. Let's try to work and see if we can make that idea work. Let's find out what's not working or what your reservations are. And sometimes we're able to actually work it through and make it a really good piece for them. And that's one thing that I've learned over time is sometimes you're just willing to throw out something because this is not working, and you think you're locked up, but you just haven't gone far enough. Yeah. You haven't gone into the finish mode.
Yeah,
an interesting little thing that I like to think about is that at some point, the song "Hey Jude" by the Beatles, that song's written on the back of a napkin at some point. It's not this iconic song of this super band. And can you imagine a band setting out to say, we're going to write one of the most recognizable songs of all time? That would lock anybody up. It's on the back of a napkin. They're probably just sketching and doodling it out. And it's the same thing for us. If you sit down to create a masterpiece, probably not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that goes down to that. I think that's an emotional block right there, and that is, and the way you deal with that is you again ask yourself questions. Well, what happens if I do finish this? What happens then? What happens then? Think it through all the way to the end, and see what the worst possibility and the best possibility is, and then at some point you got to just take that risk and go do it. Any other
Awesome.
questions?
There's a lot of really good questions. We just don't have time to answer them all. But man, we really appreciate all the input through this.
And maybe we can try to set up we have a forum at SVS Learn. We can set up a forum and maybe talk about this if you guys want to. We can post some of these questions in there and maybe start to answer them and see what other people do about this. I think the main thing is just going through Jake's big list and say, have I checked off all these things as being step one? Because a lot of people are mentioning like, oh, I got stuck in this one part or this other part. I think that's a good thing is just go through all of it. If you can check it all off, you should be on your way to making stuff.
Yeah, I agree. All right, should we call it good and put this one in the books?
Yeah. Thanks to everybody for joining us.
All right, thanks for watching that webinar. I hope you took something away from it, something that's going to help you create better, to keep you from falling into those traps, those creative block traps. If you like anything that we talked about today, there's more of this every third Thursday from svslearn.com. That's the third Thursday webinars. So check those out on the third Thursdays. We announce them on the svslearn.com website, on the Facebook page. Consider subscribing. I call it the Netflix of art classes. There's hundreds of hours of content on there to learn from, and if you like the things that I do as an artist, I teach you how I do them, how I ink, how I draw, how I build shapes. So check those out, and for like $15 a month for now, they've been talking about raising the price, but for $15 a month for now, you can subscribe and get access to all of that stuff. So thanks everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye.